Hello, welcome to this week's class. This week we will be on chapter 6. So let's go ahead and open up our books on chapter 6, page 2. Next to number 1, where it says the bar chart method. Next to that term, I want you guys to put small, uncomplicated jobs. For your smaller projects, you want to use the bar chart method to schedule them out. And again, when it is a small, uncomplicated job. The more complicated, the bigger the project. Then you're looking at number 2, the critical path method. So next to number 2, where it says critical path method, go ahead and add larger, more complicated jobs. And I also want you to highlight the last paragraph. Let's go ahead and read it. Tells you, better suited for larger jobs, the critical path method is a more complex tool that shows how each construction task relates to each other. It is a step-by-step system for planning processes and synchronization. It identifies critical and non-critical activities in order to minimize time frame dilemmas and help to ease bottlenecks that arise. So, of course, you can dig deep a little bit more into this. It might get a little bit more complicated, a little bit more in-depth. So just to kind of give you guys an idea of what will come out on the state exam, literally 1 to 2 questions regarding the best scheduling methods for a particular project. So for example, if in the question they're telling you what scheduling method is best suited for smaller projects, best suited for uncomplicated projects, that would be the bar chart method. If in the question you get things like larger projects or projects that will extend long periods of time or complicated projects, you're going to be looking at the critical path method. So you don't want to complicate this too much. Bar chart method, small, uncomplicated jobs. Critical path method, larger, more complicated jobs. Moving forward to page 5. So we're on chapter 6, page 5. We're going to be in the first paragraph under where it says keeping the job on schedule. Now, I do want you guys to highlight those first 2 sentences where it tells you, despite the best planning and scheduling, delays can occur. Contractors and supervisors need to visit the job site daily to coordinate the work of subcontractors, resolve any conflicts, schedule material deliveries, and avoid untimely delays. So in regards to those 2 sentences, there's going to be questions such as, why should contractors or supervisors visit the job site daily? Here, they gave you so many reasons why. Okay, you can literally pick any of them and that would be the correct answer. They're not going to give you all of them, right? So you want to make sure you choose one of these answers of the list that they gave you. So for example, let's go ahead and reread that. Contractors and supervisors need to visit the job site daily to coordinate the work of subcontractors, to make sure that they're doing their jobs the way it's listed in the contract, and to make sure that they also don't get delayed in their projects. Resolve any conflicts, of course, make sure your personal supervisors, your personal employees are making sure the project is running the way it should. Schedule material deliveries, that's an important one. Sometimes materials need to be delivered and you want to make sure those materials will be delivered on time and avoid untimely delays. So this basically goes back to chapter 2 where I was telling you guys, make sure in your contract you have that clause that states if you're being delayed in the project for things that are out of your control, make sure you add that clause where you're not responsible in case of delays caused by acts of God. Anything else would fall under your responsibility. So for example, making sure your materials arrive on time, that is your responsibility. Making sure that your subcontractors are working on their projects and finishing their contracts on time, that does fall under your responsibility. Resolving any conflicts or having adequate employees at the project at all times, that falls under your responsibility. So again, a lot of this is tailored around you, the contractor, not getting delayed in your project. Now, in the second paragraph, I do want you to highlight that very first sentence where it says, many small contractors handle this supervisory job themselves. But as the business grows, it usually becomes necessary to assign the job to someone else. Now, this is where I tell people that tell me, well, I've been working for 30 years without a license and it goes pretty well for me. And the issue is, and I always ask them, are you still in the middle of every project? Are you still working in that project day after day? Well, yeah, I'm in the projects with my employees. And that's the problem. You, as your business grows, it will be impossible for you to be in the middle of every single project. As your business grows, you're going to have to start hiring employees. And from those employees that you hire, you're going to have to promote them eventually to supervisors and foremans. Why is that? To ensure that every project that you have running will be done at the exact time frame that you put in the contract. It's just the rule of thumb, right? As the business grows, it will be impossible for you to be at every single project, or impossible for you to take care of everything. We're going to have to start delegating responsibilities. So for example, you're probably going to have a safety manager or a safety manager. Sorry about that. For example, you probably will have a safety manager that their sole purpose is to ensure that everyone is wearing their safety equipment, making sure that they're doing the safety meetings at least once every 10 days, making sure that everybody has the reflectors when needed, hearing protection when needed, making sure that the company is ordering PPE equipment on time. And then you're probably going to have a labor supervisor, making sure that the jobs are being done correctly, making sure that the jobs are following the building code, making sure that the person that is working in the project has the adequate experience to do that particular trade. But again, as the business grows, you, the contractor, will start delegating responsibility, giving different responsibilities to your employees. Now we're going to go ahead and move forward to chapter 6, page 10. Chapter 6, page 10, where it says surety bond. Now, I do want you to highlight the third paragraph in full. Let's go ahead and highlight that and let's go ahead and read it. Bonds can be obtained from insurance agents who represent bonding companies. They charge a percentage of the contract price, usually in the 1 to 2% range. The bond may or may not be paid by the hiring agency, but it should be recognized when the bid is submitted. So from number 1 through number 4 on page 10, these are known as contract bonds. Why? Because depending on the contract, they can ask you for one bond, all of the bonds, or none of the bonds. It really depends on the contract, which is why they are known as contract bonds, because it depends on the contract. Now, to make it a little bit more understandable for you, for those of you that work on strictly residential properties, for those of you that work strictly on residential properties, you might have never heard of any of these bonds, and that's okay, because these bonds are much more common in bigger commercial projects and bigger public projects. So for any of you that are working on residential projects and you're saying, I've never heard of any of these bonds, that is 100% okay. As your business grows and as you start venturing off into bigger commercial projects and bigger public projects, you're going to come to terms with these bonds a lot more. You're going to be hearing the terms a lot more, and it's better to be overly prepared. It's better to know what the client is asking of you, as opposed to saying, what is a bid bond, or what is a contract bond, or what is a performance bond, because the client might not like that. So let's go ahead and start discussing the bonds in detail. Number 1, where it says the bid bond. What does the bid bond do? It guarantees that the bidder on a contract will enter into the contract and furnish the required payment and performance bonds if awarded the contract. So what does the bid bond do? It guarantees that you will do the job at the bid that was submitted. So for example, if you have the opportunity for a public project, you submitted a bid of $50,000 and the contract requirement stated, if you obtain this contract, you're going to take out the liability insurance and you're going to have the performance and payment bond. Awesome. You say, I know my company can qualify for these bonds. I know my company can get that insurance. So you submit the $50,000 bid, knowing in the back of your head, you also have to get these bonds. Let's say a week passes, 7 days pass, and you realize you made an error. As opposed to $50,000, it was actually supposed to be $65,000. And this is where the problem occurs. Because if the company that you submitted the bid for accepts your bid, you would have to do the job for the bid that was submitted. There is no change in your bid, especially after 1 week time. So the bid bond guarantees your price, and it also lets them know, I can furnish any other bond or any other insurance that is required to do this project. That's what you are stating. Now the contract bond. The contract bond guarantees job completion and payment for all labor and materials. Basically, the contract bond, number 2, is like number 3 and number 4, but in one. So the contract bond guarantees job completion. It guarantees the project will be done on time with 0 errors, no building code errors, no, oh my God, I'm getting delayed in the project, at least a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, right? It also guarantees that you will be paying your subcontractors and your suppliers. Okay, so when you obtain this bond, you are saying, I will complete the project by the contract date with 0 errors, and I will be paying our subcontractors and suppliers. You are guaranteeing that. Number 3, the payment bond guarantees that suppliers and subcontractors will be paid for the work performed under the contract. So sometimes contractors tend to get a little confused, or my students get a little confused. They say, what does the payment bond do? What does it guarantee? Well, it guarantees that your subcontractors and suppliers will be paid. So think back to chapter 3. What did we discuss in chapter 3? I told you guys that if subcontractors and suppliers were not paid, they too can submit a mechanics lien on the property, even if the client paid all the money to the prime. And some of my students at that time would be like, how is that fair? How is it fair that the client paid all the money to the prime decided not to pay the subs and suppliers, and yet they still can place a mechanics lien on the property? I told them, it's not fair, right? I know it's not fair. However, at the end of the day, as a sub or a supplier, you need to look out for your own company, for your own employees. So you have to place the mechanics lien on the property. So why does the client ask for the payment bond? The client will ask the prime contractor for the payment bond to guarantee payment for subs and suppliers. If the payment is guaranteed for subs and suppliers, there's no need for a mechanics lien. The client will not have to worry, oh, did the sub get paid? Oh, did the subcontractor get paid? It takes away that worry from the client. Number 4, the performance bond guarantees the contractor will perform the contract in accordance with its terms and conditions. Now, you're going to see this a lot more common in commercial projects, and I'll tell you why. Let's say, for example, Walmart is opening a new store in Redlands, right? And they're advertising on the radio, on social media, on the newspapers. We will be opening March 1st. We're going to be opening on March 1st. So they're advertising like crazy, right? They hired you as a contractor, and you stated we should be open by the last week of February. Job should be cleared, pass inspection, everything. Awesome. So what happens if you start to get delayed in your project? Not because of things out of your control, but things that are in your control, like having adequate employees, making sure the supplies are delivered on time, making sure that the work is passing inspection. So if you start getting delayed in the project and you can't open by March 1st, what's going to happen with Walmart's advertising money? All the money they spent on the radio, all the money they spent on the newspaper, giving out flyers. We're opening March 1st. And because of you, they can't open March 1st. All that advertising money is lost. Now, do you think that they're just going to be like, it doesn't matter? No, they're going to make sure that they recover that advertising budget from somewhere. So where do you think they're going to recover it from? From you, right? Because you're the person that they hired to ensure that they were going to be able to open by March 1st. So performance bond, it guarantees that you will do the job according to the contract, which means passing inspection and getting the job done by its completion date. In the last paragraph on page 10, let's go ahead and highlight this paragraph in full, where it tells you new contractors should be aware that bonding requirements may exclude their new business from bidding on desired jobs. Bonding companies will not take risks without verifying the technical and resource capabilities of the bonded contractor. It is essential, then, for your business to practice sound business management techniques if you hope to be able to qualify for the bonding in the future. So this is what I want you to take away from this paragraph. New contractors will have difficulty approving for a lot of these bonds due to little or no work history. I'm going to repeat that. New contractors will have difficulty approving for these bonds due to little or no work history. Okay? If you are denied any of these bonds, you can submit an appeal with the insurance commissioner. If you are denied any of these bonds, you can submit an appeal with the insurance commissioner. But let's think, why would we get denied? They say new contractors, so people that just started their business, people that just got their license, will have difficulty approving for these bonds. And what did I say earlier? I said these are the bigger commercial projects, the bigger public projects. So if you're trying to obtain a $1 million public contract with 1 week with your license, with your new business, then yes, you will have difficulty. So we have to make sure that as the business grows, right, we're keeping our stuff in order. We're building our credit. We're building our finances up to ensure we can qualify for these bonds in the future. All right. Now we're going to go ahead and move forward. Chapter 6, page 12. Chapter 6, page 12. Now where it says estimating, I definitely want you to highlight that. Let's go ahead and read it. Estimating is the process of identifying the expenses associated with the project that the contractor will incur. So estimating, what does that mean? It's in the name, right? It's an estimate. It's not the exact price the client will pay. Estimating, you're giving a guesstimate. You're giving a más o menos, right? In the neighborhood, ballpark it. It's an estimate. It is not the exact price the client will pay. Now, if you're asking me how you should submit an estimate, you should submit the estimate as close to your bid as possible. And I'll tell you why. As soon as you give a client a price, that's pretty much it, right? They're going to cover their ears. They don't want to hear anything else. Try to get your estimate as close as you can to your bid, as close to you can as your final price. Will never be exact. I know it's not going to be exact, but try to get it as close as you can. Now, the bid is the final price. The bid is the price the client will pay. The bid is the price on the contract. The bid is you tallied up all the cost, all the direct cost, all the overhead, any little cost that you can think of. You tallied it up and you gave that in the final price. So remember, the estimate is a guesstimate, right? It's a más o menos. It's ballpark. It's very close to your bid, but not exact. The bid is the final price, the price that the client will pay, the price that is in your contract. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and move forward. We're going to be on chapter 6, page 14. So on chapter 6, page 14, we're going to be under where it says the estimating and bidding process. Now, in the very first paragraph, I definitely do want you to highlight the last 2 sentences. Let's go ahead and read that. It says, plans must be approved by the local building department before construction begins. So I understand that some of you never will have to take out plans, or you will never have to take out permits. However, these questions do come out in the state exam, so even if you're not going to have a lot of experience in doing so, you're still going to have to know this information. So let's go ahead and read it again. Plans must be approved by the local building department before construction begins. If the plans have already been approved, be sure to read any notes about the plans from the building department, as these notes might impact the project. So what does that mean? Basically, that is telling you, once your plans have been approved by the local building department, the very next thing that you guys will do as contractors is check the notes. That's really, really important. So if you guys ever get a question, what is the next step? What is your next step after your plans have been approved? The next step will be check the notes or revise the notes. Means the same thing. In the following paragraph, which is basically 2 sentences, let's go ahead and highlight that as well. Now, this is talking about a specification sheet. Specification sheets provide details that were not in the original plans. Let's go ahead and read it though. Specifications provide details that are not present in the plans. These are frequently important technical details, such as the type of materials to be supplied. Normally, specification sheets come along with the plans. They come stapled to the plans. However, the question that they can give you here is, what is the purpose of a specification sheet? Or what information is found on the specification sheet? The specification sheet provides details that were not present in the original plans. Now, in the last paragraph on page 14, let's go ahead and highlight the entire paragraph. Let's go ahead and highlight it all. If errors are present in the plans or specifications, you should contact the architect who created them for clarification and correction of the errors in writing. If there's an error in the plans or the specs, the specifications, take that back to the architect immediately. Sometimes contractors say, well, it's not our fault that the architect had an error on the plans. And I totally agree with you. However, at the end of the day, who is the last party to review the plans? The contractor. So if you did not take them back to the architect, both the architect and the contractor will be held responsible. The other thing too would be, even though it's a headache, trust me, I get it. Sometimes a waste of time to go back to the architect, have them correct the error. It is much more difficult to have them corrected after you began construction. So if you begin construction and then you find an error on there, an error in your building code, at that point it becomes much more costly and your project will be delayed. Much better, if you see an error on the plans, take it back to the architect immediately. Now, if the plans were created by the owner and not an architect, the owner should be contacted and made aware of the errors in writing. In addition to inaccurate estimations, contractors, architects, and owners can be held liable for a building code violation. Here's the thing, guys. And this is mostly, again, due to people, more or less for contractors that have to take out permits, that have to read plans to do their work. I realize this is not for some of you, but again, this information will come out on the state exam. It is difficult to provide an estimate on plans that have not been approved, because if they have to change anything, they have to change a sort of material, or they have to change anything, any type of hardware, it will change your estimate. And as stated, once you give a price to a client, they close their ears, they don't want to hear anything more. So if the plans have not been approved, it will be an inaccurate estimate, because if they have to change anything on the plans, the price of your estimate will also change. So it is in your best interest to make sure that the plans have been approved prior to you submitting an estimate. Knowingly violating building codes can also lead to license discipline or revocation. So what does this mean? This is for some of my contractors that, oh, you know what, we don't have to take out permits, right? You guys are doing ADUs, you guys are doing remodels, you guys are constructing new rooms and garages. If the owner or you do not take out the permits, that's you knowingly violating building codes. At that point, yes, they will suspend your license, and depending on the severity of the situation, they can actually revoke your license. Some of these fines are very, very expensive. For an example, I had a contractor constructing an ADU in a garage in Los Angeles when I was working in our El Monte location. The contractor came, showed me the fines that the CSLB provided him. Those fines were over $20,000 altogether. So it was the fine from the CSLB, the fine from the city, because the city also gave him a fine because he was constructing an ADU, didn't take out any permits. It was actually very dangerous for him to do that because it's a fire hazard, it's a fire violation. And not only that, they made him tear down the entire project. So they tore down the entire project. At that point, the client lost money, the contractor was fined, his license was suspended, all because he refused to take out any permits. In the last sentence, you should not bid on jobs that contain code violations, insufficient details, or errors that have not been corrected. Again, they're telling you do not submit an estimate or a bid on a job where it can contain code violations. For example, the plans have not been approved, there's not enough details or errors. The reason why is because you cannot give an accurate estimate. You cannot give an accurate bid if there's code violations, if there's not enough details, or there's errors. This will only save you money and protect your license by following this rule. If you do not follow this rule, you can waste a lot of time and a lot of money and possibly risk your license. Now, again, let's go back to this. The very first thing that you're going to do once your plans have been approved is revise the notes. Once you check your notes, what is the next step? Going to page 15, your next step will be walk the job. So once the plans have been approved, once you check your notes, what is the next step? The next step is walk the job. Now, in the last paragraph on page 15, I want you guys to highlight the first two sentences where it says, labor is usually the most difficult item to estimate. Labor costs are calculated according to work classification. So this is for some of my contractors, new contractors mostly. Sometimes you're not going to know how to bid a job or know how much to pay someone at the very beginning, right? Let's say you're going to hire someone with little to no experience. You're probably going to pay them $100 to $120 a day. A little bit more experience, probably $150 a day. Probably an expert in their field, $200 to $250 a day, depending on where you find your people, what connections that you have. But the reason why they're telling you it's the most difficult item to estimate is because you're gonna learn this as you go. But once you start working on projects, once you start hiring people, once you have your set employees, the labor costs will become easier because now you know, hey, I did a project like this, very similar, not exact, but I did a project very similar to this 3 months ago. The project lasted me 1 week. So now when you're submitting your estimate, you know it's gonna last me 7 days to do the project. So now when I submit my estimate, I'm gonna put in 10 days just to be sure, right? Here's the other thing too. Anytime you're submitting any type of estimate or bid, it should never be exact. So what do I mean by that? If you think it's gonna last you 7 days, put in 10 days. If you think it's gonna last you, it's gonna be $1,500 in material, put $2,000 in material. Trust me, that's gonna save you a lot of money and time. For those contractors that have a lot of experience doing this, they know if materials cost you $1,500, put $2,000, because there's a lot of things that can go wrong. A lot of time you're short on supply, right? So let's do that, and that's gonna save you a lot of time and money. But labor costs are gonna change, and you're also gonna get a history of your labor cost. So keep this in mind. Once you start growing your business, once you've done a couple projects under your belt, you're going to have a history of labor cost. So when you do get a similar project, you can go back and see, this project lasted me 3 days. This project lasted me 7 days. This project lasted me a month. And then you can get an idea of how much to charge. It probably won't be exact, but it's going to give you an idea of how much to charge. And that's what you want to base your prices on, your own labor cost history. Now, the best way to reduce labor cost is check your time cards. I'm going to say that again. The best way to reduce your labor cost is check your time cards. All right, we're going to move forward to page 16, chapter 6, page 16. We're going to be in the very first paragraph. Now, in the first paragraph, I want you to highlight that very first sentence, and you're also going to be highlighting basically, if you want, you can highlight the entire paragraph. Let's go with that. The only one that I don't really cover is the second sentence, but we'll go ahead and read it. Materials are usually the largest single item in a bid and can be fairly accurately determined from takeoffs, quantity, and measurements taken from the plans. These are converted to cost on the estimation form. Prices can be obtained from published price lists and quotes from suppliers and subcontractors. It is important to be aware that although most suppliers will stand behind their quote, they may not quote every item on your list. It is a good idea to get quotes from more than one supplier and compare them. So this is very simple. Where do you obtain prices for materials? From subcontractors or suppliers. It is important to be aware that although most suppliers will stand behind their quote, they may not quote every item on your list. Now, this is really important. Let's say you submit a list of 10 items to a supplier. The supplier comes back at you with the price. Make sure they quoted every item on the list. Because if the price only reflected 6 out of the 10, that means you still have to go purchase 4 items somewhere else. So make sure that they quoted the entire list. Now, in the second paragraph, go ahead and highlight that very first sentence. So if you guys have been in construction for a while, you guys are going to know the prices of materials fluctuate throughout the year. They normally get higher. So material prices often fluctuate. So you should always get items requoted and keep current cost data. What does that mean? If you got an estimate for some materials in January and in July, you're going to use those very same materials, and you're basing your estimate on the January cost of the materials, you're 100% in the wrong. Get your materials requoted to ensure that you're providing an accurate estimate, because you're going to see if the price of the materials change dramatically and you already signed the contract, you already started work. At that point, you're going to have to pay that money out of your own pocket. So make sure you're getting the most up-to-date price quotes to ensure that you're giving accurate estimations. Now, in the third paragraph, I do want you to highlight that second sentence. And I also want to add this. Material suppliers will often offer a 1 to 2% discount when you pay in cash or on time. I definitely want you to add that sentence, and I'm going to repeat myself. Material suppliers will often offer a 1 to 2% discount when paid in cash or on time. Now, it doesn't matter the material that it is. So sometimes at the state, they change it up a little bit. They'll say lumber suppliers, tile suppliers, carpet suppliers. Doesn't matter. 1 to 2% discount. Now, some of you obtain much larger discounts, much larger than 1 to 2%. That's 100% okay. But at the state, 1 to 2%. All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and move forward to page 20. I'm going to give you an example of the bid a little later, but let's go ahead and focus on page 20, where it says number 14, do not forget retentions. I want you guys to go ahead and highlight that paragraph in full where it tells you retentions are also referred to as retainers or retainage. Some jobs will require retention, especially in the case of public works. Retentions are funds withheld to guarantee completion of a project or to correct defects that may occur. Retentions are also usually returned when the project is complete, lien periods have expired, and the construction is agreed to be free of defects. Retentions usually do not affect the job cost, but they do affect cash flow. Not factoring in retentions can lead to cash shortages and affect your ability to pay bills if you are not careful. So what is a retention? Retentions are the last 5 to 10% of your contract. They are waiting for the contract to pass inspection and the expiration of your lien period. I do want you to make a note. Public works max retention is 5%. Public works max retention is 5%. That means if you're working on a public works contract, they can only retain 5% of the contract value. Okay? Now, if it's private works, residential or commercial, it's anywhere between 5 to 10%. And at that point, they're waiting for the expiration of the lien period as well, and for the process or the project to pass inspection. So here's the thing. If your project does not pass inspection, they will not give you your retention. So make sure your project passes inspection, then they'll go ahead and give you your retention. All right, guys. Now we're going to go ahead and go to page 18 and 19. We're going to go back and we're going to talk about some rules for you guys when you're submitting a bid. And then you're going to see that on the next few pages, we kind of already covered all that. But let's go ahead and do that. We're going to go to chapter 6, page 18 and 19, and we're going to go over some rules that you guys need to follow in regards to submitting a bid. Okay? Now, number one, profit is the most important part of your bid. Everybody's in business to make profit. If you're not in business to make profit, you're going to go bankrupt. This is really important for my contractors that sometimes do job at cost. Doing a job at cost means you literally didn't make any money. You literally did the job for free, right? Because you made no profit on the project. Sometimes we're guilty of this, especially when it gets a little slow, right? So when November, December, January hits, sometimes we're taking jobs to pay our bills. But it's really important to know if we're not making a profit on the project, we're not helping ourselves, we're hurting ourselves. Do not submit a bid for a project that does not contain profit. We already went over that. We know that if we're not making profit, we will eventually go bankrupt. Even if you're just taking the project just to pay your bills, it gets a little dangerous right there. Because at that point, if there's no profit, there's not enough money to invest in the following contract. There's not enough working capital to invest in your following projects. So make sure every single project contains profit. Now, if your bids are being rejected, lower your fixed expenses, your overhead. So let's say you submitted a total of 10 bids and you only got 1 or 2 of them. At that point, your overhead percentage is too high. We're gonna get our overhead percentage from our income statement. So in chapter 5, we went over the income statement. I told you guys, what are your expenses from salaries to utilities? That was your overhead percentage. So if your overhead percentage is too high, you're gonna get your bids rejected. As your business grows, yes, you're gonna add more expenses. But if you grow too fast and your expenses start to scale higher and higher, your bids will start being rejected. Keep this in mind. The lower your overhead, the higher your profit. The lower your overhead, the lower your expenses, the higher your profit. Keep that in mind. This is a trap a lot of new contractors fall into. They try to grow too quickly. They add too much expenses right away. Grow slowly. If you grow slowly, your expenses will remain low, your profit margins will remain high. Your bid should almost be the same as your estimated cost. That's 100% true. You take your car to a mechanic. The mechanic says to fix your car is going to be roughly $2,500. Awesome. You give them a couple days, you come back, and the mechanic says $4,000. At that point, there's an issue because the estimate was $2,500. You expected a little more than $25, a little less than $25, right around $2,500. If you come back to the mechanic and the mechanic automatically says, yeah, your bill's $4,000, there's gonna be an issue, right? Same thing with you guys. And what did I say previously? When you give an estimate to the client, you give them the price, that's the price the client wants to pay, right? Take your time with your estimate. Get it as close to your bid as possible. It will never be exact, but it has to be close. Because if you submitted a bid for $15,000 and you come back and says, okay, after everything, after I totaled the materials, after I totaled this, after I totaled that, it came out to $17,200, that's not bad, right? But get it as close to your bid. Take your time on your estimate. Because if you give them a price and then all of a sudden the price difference is 50% more, 85% more, 35% more, you're more than likely going to lose that job. So make sure you take your time on your estimate. Try to calculate as much as you can prior to you giving a price. Calculate all costs first, then add profit. This is a big error a lot of new contractors tend to make. I can't tell you how many contractors sometimes, after they get their license, they come back to me and they're like, Luis, I have a great opportunity for a big project, probably going to be making over $1 million here. And I always tell them, slow your roll. Let's talk about your expenses first. Let's talk about your direct costs, and then we'll think about how much money you're going to make. So I literally have to force them to sit down because they're so happy of a great opportunity, and I'm happy for them as well. But I always tell them, calculate all your costs first, your direct cost. How much money are you spending in materials? What insurances do you need? Do you need bonds? Are you going to make the plans, or are you going to pay an architect? Is the client going to pay them? How far is the project? How many days are you going to be out there? How long is the project? How much time are you going to dedicate to it? Are you going to need those porta potties? Are you going to have to get a fence around the project? How many employees are you going to need? All that must be factored in first before you even thinking about profit. And I'll tell you this, if you're thinking about profit too early, before you even calculated your cost, you're going to make an error. And again, once you submit that estimate, once you submit that bid, once you sign that contract, any changes in price, you're more than likely going to have to eat it. So make sure, you guys, when you get this opportunity, you sit down, you calculate all the costs first, then you think about your profit. Never negotiate profit or overhead, only the scope of the work. Very important detail. There's things that we cannot negotiate. Profit, you don't want to negotiate, or overhead. If you negotiate overhead, you're not paying your bills. So if you're not paying your cell phone bill, they're going to cut it off. You're not paying your rent, they're going to kick you out, right? You can't negotiate overhead because that means you're not paying your bills. You cannot negotiate profit either because, again, the whole point of us being in business is to make money, to make a profit. If you're not making a profit, you're eventually going to go bankrupt. Only the scope of the work. What is the scope of the work? The scope of the work is the work that the client wants. For example, let's say the client wants to remodel their kitchen and their 2 bathrooms, but they only have money for the kitchen. At that point, let's do the kitchen first. We can come back later once you save up a little bit more money and knock out the 2 bathrooms. But if you're trying to cut so many costs to where you can do the kitchen and the 2 bathrooms, substitute so much material, substitute so much labor, no. At that point, it's going to become a headache, and more than likely, you're going to be cutting your overhead percentage way down. You're going to be cutting your profit percentage way down, and at that point, it wouldn't even make sense to do the project. The only thing that you can negotiate ever is the scope of the work that the client wants. So if you tell them and you break it down to them, you only have enough money to do what you want to cover the kitchen. Let's make sure the kitchen is beautifully remodeled. Let's get you the materials that you want, the way you want it, the quality that you want it. Because if you try to cut too many costs and you're trying to fit those 2 bathrooms in with the kitchen, at that point, the client will not be 100% happy. You will not be 100% happy because you're cutting so much of your overhead and so much of your profit percentage. Double check your bid before submitting to ensure no errors. You would think that's obvious, but it's not sometimes, right? You want to double check your bid before you submit the bid. Double check it just to ensure there's no errors. You got to make sure that you got the up-to-date material cost. You got to make sure that you factored everything that we already talked about. Your labor costs, the gas. Do you need a fence? Are you going to rent those porta potties? What permits do you need? What insurances do you need? How many employees are you going to have? Payroll taxes. All that must be factored in prior to you submitting your bid. And the biggest risk factor is the owner's financial stability, whether or not the client will pay you. Now, without the license, unfortunately, there is no protections. We have zero protections. But with the license, with our contractor's license, now we have the protection of the court. We can place a mechanics lien on the property. We can sue them in small claims. There's so many protections with the license now, as long as you follow the correct steps. Without the license, that's where the risk comes, because you can do an entire project for a client. The client says, I don't want to pay you. I don't have money to pay you. You're out of luck. Okay. Now, we're going to go ahead and give a bid example. I want to show you guys how to construct a bid, not how to estimate. That's your job. That's from your years of experience. But I am going to show you guys how to construct an estimate. Hey guys, so here's the example of the bid. Again, going back to the beginning, what is direct cost? The direct cost is how much money is it going to cost you to do that job. Keep in mind, there is no profit on the direct cost. You are not making money on the direct cost. So let's calculate all of our costs first. Gas, permits, workers' comp, payroll, equipment rental, materials, payroll taxes. We calculated all that up and we said $30,000. So it's going to cost us, the contractor, to do this job. It's going to cost us $30,000. Now we got to tally up our overhead. Now again, our overhead percentage is going to be from our income statement. That depends on how much income we normally make on a given month and what our expenses are. Now, normally an accountant will give you the overhead percentage. How to get the overhead percentage will not come out on the state, but if you're interested in that, send me an email directly. I can provide you that formula. But normally at the state, they will give you these three numbers. They're going to give you the direct cost, your overhead percentage, and your profit. So they're already going to give you that information. So overhead, once we calculated our salaries, utilities, rent, our truck payments, our loan payments, our accountant said 3%, which is not bad. 3% overhead percentage. How much do we want to make in profit? We want to make at least 10% in profit. Now, there is no exact profit percentage that you have to add. It really just depends on you. How much money do you want to make? All right, so what is the first step? The first step is, let's reflect our direct cost with 100. So 30,000 will equal 100. So we have to reflect our direct cost with 100. 30,000 equals 100. Now we're going to go ahead and add our overhead percentage. 3 plus 10 is 13. Now we're going to go ahead and subtract. 100 minus 13 is 87. And then we're going to go ahead and turn the 87 into a decimal. And then we're going to divide. 30,000 divided by 0.87. That's going to give us our selling price. That is the price the client will pay. That is the price that is in our contract. The selling price will be $34,482 with 76 cents. Remember, the direct cost, overhead, and profit can change, but the formula will be the same. Those three numbers, your direct cost can change, your profit percentage can change, and your overhead percentage can change. And as stated, when you go to the state, they will give you those three numbers. The numbers can change, but the formula will stay the same. This is the formula. If you follow the formula, you're going to get it correct. All right, you guys, so that is chapter 6. That is the end of the book. If you guys have any questions regarding the material, make sure you guys tune into our live Q&As on YouTube. Every Thursday from 6 to 6:30, we have a live Q&A on our YouTube channel. You guys can ask any of your questions there to get a live response. Also, make sure you guys utilize your instructors. Every single one of you guys, El Monte, Anaheim, North Hills, Chula Vista, San Bernardino, you guys have instructors that are available to help you out. Send them an email, give them a call, set up an appointment with them directly. Or if you feel like you need to contact me directly, I'm always available as well. Send me an email, more than happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much. I appreciate you guys' time.